if you'd like to come up to the stage, Lara. Lara's going to talk about automation, robotisation. I'm not sure that's a word I've ever said before. I'll hand over to you, Lara. You can take it from here.
Thank you ever so much, Lem, and thank you for inviting me to speak at this Construction News Summit. It's really, really good to be here in this rather strange, sort of jittery sort of week. Anyway, lovely to be here. I'm Lara Potter. I lead workforce planning for Arcadis in the UK, which means I spend a lot of my time dealing with the challenges of today and the next few months, and slightly less of my time looking at the requirements of our workforce over the next 3, 5 and 10 years' time. I also chair the Future Skills and Culture Group at the Association of Consultancy and Engineering, and I've recently been co-opted onto the Skills for a Modernised Industry Group at the Construction Leadership Council. I should declare, though, I'm not an HR professional. I trained as an engineer, and I've spent most of my career in environmental consultancy. And I recently shifted my focus to workforce. And the reason I did that is that I believe that the only way this sector will really attract the right talent and thrive and meet the commitments we have around social and environmental outcomes will be through the skills and culture of all the organisations that we all represent. So, let's get started. Lem's already mentioned one of the publications that I've got up here. The good news is that we already know a lot about what a future-proof construction industry looks like. We are really lucky that we've got all sorts of colleagues in the industry who have sweated blood, sweat and tears to really try and explain what that looks like. These are just a few publications which are really worth a read if you're interested in this topic. The Construction Playbook, the Farmer Review, which Lem's mentioned, the Future of Consultancy, all talk about the opportunity and impact of digitisation and the opportunity to shift towards a much more outcome-based model, where the sector is much more aligned to value rather than cost. The Industry Skills Plan articulates what we need to do collectively to shift the built environment workforce to align to those market needs. And the Workplace Report, which was a publication from the emerging professionals at the ACE, focuses much more on the changes in culture that will be required to deliver all of these. Of course, this is not an exhaustive list. There are many, many more documents which help us understand what a future-proof workforce looks like, including government policy, regulation, publications from outside the sector. There are many on future of the workforce and the themes of digital transformation. And there's all sorts of amazing sector-specific work on skills and culture from the likes of Centre for Digital Built Britain in Cambridge and Go Construct. Just this week, I don't know if any of you have spotted it, but the ICE have published Engineering Rebellion, which is a paper which explores the civil engineer of the future. We also know that construction is one of the last sectors to go through digital transformation, and therefore we must have an opportunity to learn from other sectors. In fact, I would suggest that we must do this. In terms of skills and people, the boundaries between the sectors are becoming increasingly indistinct. So, let's explore some of those overarching themes in these reports. Surprise, surprise, the first one is data and technology. I'm sure that everybody in this room can point to their own experiences of the application of technology or data in their current role. Maybe this has given you an improved insight on operational performance. Perhaps technology has allowed you to think differently about the possible solutions. Through technology, new build is shifting predominantly from on-site construction, as we know, to off-site manufacturing and on-site fabrication. The promise is better control, improved productivity, and improved quality. In the professions, there is a similar picture happening. Many design elements are already automated. Where process is consistent, consultants are finding opportunities to build data sets which allow for better benchmarking and analytics. Ultimately, this shifts the assurance of design into the process, which is significantly managed by the machine, rather than relying on professional judgment. This is something that the Suskins wrote about in their book, which was called The Future of the Professions, back in 2015. I spoke at a conference before the pandemic, mid-2019, where there was a bit of a debate about the rate of change, which of course is important to us all. and particularly the rate of change to modern methods of construction in the housing sector. At that time, the estimate was that the ratio of modern to traditional methods was about 1 in 10. There was a consensus at that time that it was likely to tip the other way, with 90% modern methods by 2030. I'd be really interested if there's a view in the room around that. There have been bold new market entrants who've sought to disrupt business models and make the most of what data and technology offers. Katerra sought to simplify the supply chain by connecting across the life cycle of the built asset. Sidewalk Labs was an ambitious project backed by Alphabet, a subsidiary of Google, to take data and a tech-led approach to the development of the Toronto waterfront. You might be aware that both of those new entrants have come to an early demise. But in my view, these are just the first and will not be the last to take bold steps to change the business model that we're all working in. The other critical element to harnessing data is the opportunity to become much more aligned to the customer need. This is what both Katerra and Sidewalk Labs understood. And to give some indication on the opportunity here, research which ACE did showed that if effectively harnessed, the abundance of customer use and performance data could deliver annual benefits of around about £15 billion across the UK's infrastructure. So it's not to be sniffed at. The second theme that I have here is value-driven demand. Now, I don't know about you, but the two presidents delivering their speeches at COP26 while standing in the sea underlined real impacts of climate change on world communities. And we know the built environment contributes to about 40% of all greenhouse gases. The UK has made an illegal commitment to become a net zero economy by 2050. If we are not already, very soon we need to be thinking about circularity and retrofit. One of the key themes at the Construction Leadership Council is RMI, repair, maintenance and improvement. Buildings will be designed to be broken down and reused. In 20 years' time, cities will be greener. We will be thinking about green infrastructure, heat attenuation, climate resilience, energy solutions. And we will have a better understanding of how we build benefits cases for this wider definition of value. And if you don't believe all of this, or the rate at which this is happening, then I guess the other place to look is the way that money is flowing and the success of sustainable funds, and particularly what's happened over the last 18 months or so. There is an increasing influence of ethical investors, and it's estimated that half of all investors have significantly increased their allocation into sustainable funds over the last couple of years. The third theme is the opposing forces of devolution and globalisation, and I'll only just touch on this. So whilst the levelling up agenda is becoming a bit of a political hot potato, we are without a doubt seeing a shift towards devolution, both on spending and decision-making powers. This inevitably brings closer alignment between the built environment sector and customers and users of the built environment. But there is this opposing force of globalisation. The UK construction sector has a complex supply chain, which we know, with an increasing number of elements manufactured and delivered outside the UK. And from the perspective of the professions, all of the big consultancies and many SMEs are now offshoring, not only for commercial benefits actually now, but also benefiting from a global talent and skills pool, especially when at this time talent is in much demand. So that leads me on to the perspective of the workforce and the difference this will all make to a future-proof workforce. I've not mentioned COVID much yet. And if there's one thing that COVID has done is to demonstrate the possibility of a different way of working. The work anywhere culture is being tested. It definitely has its benefits and it has its disadvantages. But whatever we think of it, there will be long-lasting changes. Now that the majority of the world is working virtually, and as digital assurance is built into the design and construct process, the opportunity for the client is to seek the best global talent to deliver locally. We've shown that improved agility to talent deployment is possible, and in Arcadis, where I work, we've started to see the benefits in terms of opportunity for our people, better access to skills and knowledge to deliver for clients, and the opportunity to access the best commercial outcomes too. But I work in a very large organisation. What might this trend mean for smaller or medium-sized organisations? I just want to turn to the domestic buildings market, which of course gets a lot of attention in the press at the moment. We're seeing consumers access trades and skills through convening platforms. Perhaps these platforms will become the norm, with the ability to triage customer requirements through the use of AI. No longer will be asking for a plumber, a plasterer, and a tiler for our bathroom upgrade or retrofit. Perhaps we'll be asking for a bathroom upgrade, and people with the right skills will be convened through a platform. Most of these platforms operate on a recommendation basis at the moment. Some are thinking more towards provision of assurance, which could be provided through competency passports or licenses. This might be one of the key shifts in the workforce over the next decade. Human resource and skills will be convened through platforms. The tasks that can be done elsewhere could be done elsewhere. Now I come on to skills rather than roles. There has always been much emphasis on roles in the built environment sector. Often these roles are aligned to trades or professions, and often there is an experience hierarchy. But if I look at the world that I work in Arcadis, we are already seeing much common ground in skills between the professions, in particular the increasing emphasis of softer skills, I'm not sure I like that term, but we use it a lot, and digital skills. Many more professionals are building their skills portfolio as T-shapes, with their core skills being the vertical and collecting additional skills through bite-sized training and on-the-job development. Whilst I believe that some trades clearly will remain true to historical context and traditional building materials and methods will have their place, many people in the traditional trades will also be more multi-skilled. And just as we're seeing in the professions, there will be crossover between the different trades. This will be really important when it comes to the white space between the professions and between the trades. If we return to the example of the domestic retrofit, perhaps the work on site would be done by one person with access to plumbing, electrical or other expertise remotely. If a surgeon can perform an operation remotely, or at least guide someone else to perform an operation remotely, why not apply similar thinking to the trades and the professions of the built environment sector? Digital transformation will no doubt continue to have unpredictable consequences in this uncertain environment. Adaptability is the core capability alongside a willingness to embrace lifelong learning and constant upskilling. And then the final thing I just want to mention on this is purposeful work. As this sector increasingly competes with other sectors for talent, purposeful work becomes more important than ever. Our opportunity is to be able to offer quality jobs, delivering on the issues of our time. During the lockdown, people, without a doubt, are thinking much more about how their job contributes to their happiness and their well-being. This includes elements of work flexibility, job security, and whether the work is meaningful. And I just wanted to pull something out of the AC Emerging Professionals work, the Future of the Workplace report that they published about 18 months ago. They said purpose was a word that was repeated again and again in the interviews. They heard that employee or trust-owned firms, especially those with a commitment to sustainable development embedded into their DNA, are very attractive to emerging professionals. However, they also heard that purpose related to simply having a sense of interesting and challenging work, that purpose also related to simply having a sense of interesting and challenging work. They were told several times, you know, engineers, they just like to do engineering. Something that's been exploited by the smaller specialist firms able to offer emerging professionals exciting technical challenges and the opportunity to see projects through from start to finish. So I want to move on now to talk a little bit more about the impact of COVID. This is a rather nice report produced by the Royal Society for Arts, Manufacturing, Commerce, published this summer, and a report under their Future of Work programme. There's an interesting section on the impact that the COVID crisis has had on technological change, and I suspect we'll hear more about it today. They concluded that the pandemic has indeed accelerated the change that was already happening, and they summarised three main reasons for that: public health considerations, customer preferences, and the cost of labour. I've got a couple of examples which might bring this to life for the sector that we work in. Firstly, in the main, when lockdown happened, members of the Association of Consultancy and Engineering very quickly moved to online working. There were very few teething problems with laptops and other home working equipment, but generally the move online was pretty straightforward for most organisations, perhaps because many consultancies were already dabbling with hybrid and other more flexible forms of work. Many of those businesses have actually now reported, surprisingly, or maybe not, a decrease in costs, an increase in the amount of fee earning time, and an associated increase in productivity. They've also reported a decrease in carbon footprint through a decrease in travel. The requirement to work from home has certainly accelerated a change that was already underway. Another example, perhaps on the fee earning side and work with clients. Prior to lockdown, a number of consultancies were testing online methods of public consultation for large infrastructure projects. Through necessity, during lockdown, many public consultations for infrastructure projects have been carried out online. The technology has moved on significantly, and the opportunity is to reach a far greater audience and thereby having a fairer and more representative consultation. I'm sure that there are people in the room better placed than me to comment on the RSA report's suggestion that modular construction has indeed increased as an overall percentage of construction. Perhaps I'll leave that one for the Q&A. I also wanted to share this data with you. I'm a bit of a data geek. So this is another graph from the RSA report. They compared data from HMRC on the take-up of furlough to the ONS data on the probability of automation. In construction, there was, as we know, there was a significant take-up of furlough during 2020. And it's also estimated that as much as 50% of some construction activity is automatable. The suggestion here is that furlough is a good indicator of the automation potential. But other data. The CITB estimate that to fulfil the pipeline of projects that we currently have and the move to the green economy, construction will need approximately 80,000 new jobs a year over the next 5 years. The sector, just to give that some comparison, we currently take in approximately 20,000 apprentices each year. And to bring the data a little closer to home, in construction, the quarterly percentage vacancy growth between April and June this year was about 45%. This all points to an absolutely enormous gap between supply and demand and overall capacity. And as standardisation and automation accelerates, which are pretty certain it will, we also have an increasing skills gap. So, the first $1 million question is, what skills do we need? And this is where the built environment sector, in my view, struggles. There is a tendency to focus on the technical skills of the design and the specific trades, but the skills shortage is about how an industry like this one takes that big step to change the ways of working, products, business models. We need a much broader thinking in the skills debate. We know the types of activities which are relatively easy to automate. These are things like performing general physical activities, controlling machines and processes, scheduling work, analysing data, inspecting equipment. And we know something about the tasks that are uniquely human and are therefore pretty hard to automate. Things like development of and interaction with machinery and computers, thinking creatively, selling to and influencing others, training and teaching, and assessing quality of service. We need to direct human capital in our sector towards the areas which are hard to automate. According to the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report, which is where this data comes from, as adoption of technology increases, 50% of all employees will need reskilling by 2025. Critical thinking and problem solving top the list of skills employers believe will grow in prominence over the next few years. And newly emerging this year are skills in self-management, such as active learning, resilience, stress tolerance, not intolerance, and flexibility. I just want to pick up something that this recent Engineering Rebellion report from the Institution of Civil Engineers, they make the case for compulsory upskilling for all members so that anyone practicing under ICE's qualifications can demonstrate not only a baseline competence on how to manage issues around net carbon and meeting the wider UN Sustainable Development Goals, but also to meet a culture of continuous upskilling to deal with accelerating change. So the second million-dollar question is, how do we deploy those new skills to meet the demands that I talked about earlier? Whilst we must be interested in specific skills, perhaps the secret sauce is the way we bring those skills together. We already see a shift away from linear, siloed ways of working to a more distributed, collaborative and experimental way of working. This is stuff everyone in this room will be involved in, and this is where we can really make the change. At Arcadis, we've put the themes of sustainability and digitisation at the heart of our strategy, and we're recognising what this means for the Arcadis workforce. And I've just got a couple of specific examples I wanted to share with you from Arcadis. So the first one is Expedition DNA, which is an Arcadis learning and development programme. It started back in 2018 and it aims to accelerate digital transformation. The programme focuses on creating an innovative mindset and developing digital capabilities within Arcadis. It contains a virtual online platform and face-to-face experience. The programme enables everybody in Arcadis to act on digital client opportunities in a more effective way and allows them to staff their team in a way when it comes to projects in a way that requires a more innovative mindset and digital capabilities. We've also invested in workforce planning. We've been focused on improving the transparency of opportunity for all our staff and supporting people to link the opportunity with their own personal development goals. We're also working to develop a much clearer workforce capability plans. These plans take into consideration the changing client needs and market needs, and the changes in application of data and technology in the service areas where we're focused. And they consider how sustainable thinking might weave its way into service delivery. Finally, the other thing that I just wanted to point out is we need to recognise those skills of the future in the way that we recruit too, and we've taken a much broader view on the definition of talent. Our focus has been on the recruitment from a much more diverse talent pool, and on the criteria selection have been extended beyond those traditional disciplines to include also the skills and competencies that I've talked about just now. So they're just a few enablers which we're deploying at Arcadis and which I'm involved with. But there are so many others as well to accelerate change, and we need to be thinking about all of these, which might include new ways of working. We talk about agile or DevOps, standardization of processes, pilots, trials, skills to bring benefits cases together, innovation frameworks, and there are many more enablers. These, in my view, they are not nice-to-haves anymore. They are absolutely essential in all of our organisations. Some of them will be familiar, and some of them will be less familiar. But underpinning all of this is a mindset which leans in to different things and working with different people, asking different questions. It's an inclusive, curious mindset. I just wanted to close with a few headlines relating to the built environment sector from the last month or so. It talks of a sector of transition. The Construction Leadership Council recognises that much of what I've talked about is already happening in the industry. But most of us also agree that it tends to be the exception rather than the rule. Question to all of you in the audience: how do we take the great stuff that is happening and scale more rapidly? This is our collective challenge. I think this is a step change for all businesses and all organisations in the built environment. We need to prepare our people positively for these changes. And in creating a thriving, modern built environment sector, we must focus on outcomes, not only the holy grail of productivity, but also improved environmental and social outcomes. We all need to be clued up on what this means in each of the roles that we play. These headlines indicate a reshaping of the sector. Change isn't easy, and sometimes it doesn't go well. But every single one of us can play our part and does play our part, and we each make a difference every day. And I'll leave you with the amazing and inspirational Jane Goodall, and ask, what kind of difference do you want to make? Thanks very much for listening.